I wanted to talk to you today about poetry. Poetry is something that escapes some undergraduate students. I remember as a high school student, junior high school student, I had to memorize some poems, and they stick with me to this day. And I think it's a good thing for educated people to have a basic knowledge of some famous Western poets. So with that in mind, I created a list and put the poems in spreadsheets. Everybody understands about, finding a web page and copying, for example, a poem or something like that. I think it's important to explain to students about fair use for educational purposes to make sure that they're not, copying things indiscriminately. But in the case of education, a poem, it's possible. And actually, unfortunately, a lot of the poems that I use are really old, as I am. But so I found a bunch of poems that I liked, and I put them into a spreadsheet, which is the first step. And so here I have a list of different poems that I've gone through. They're short, quite by design, because as we know, our students probably don't want to memorize something that's really, really huge. So I give them a piece of it, not a huge piece, but I've got just a number of poems here that I really care for. And I don't know why I'm not flipping through them right now. Or am I? Yes, I am. Okay, so the idea is to get the poems, and then with the poems, with the English teaching side of it, is to encourage shadowing. So I'm going to share with you a poem that I think is just absolutely amazing. It's a stunning poem. We'll watch the poem or part of it, and then I'll continue the discussion. Let me just optimize for sound here. Okay, and so what I've done and what I teach my students is to find a link to a video and include the link in the title of the poem. So let's just watch this poem without further ado.
Well, son, I'll tell you. It for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all the time I's been a-climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps 'cause you find it's kinda hard. Don't you fall now. For I's still going, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
So in the interest of time, I hope you agree with me, that's a very powerful poem. It tells a story. It has a lot of imagery in it. And it's something that can really bring it to life for students. So trying to find meaningful videos, or actually getting students to do that, is a very useful endeavor, I would say, in English language teaching. And at the same time, of course, you could teach about ebonics if you wanted to with this particular video, or this particular poem, this poet, Langston Hughes. But, going back to the basis of this, I have a site to be very thankful for, and I believe it's in my references. It's SlidesGo. And so this is not something that I created. It's something that I downloaded for free from SlidesGo. But, and I redacted it, so it's a little shorter than it was, but it presents the swift structure for analyzing poetry. In the poem we just watched, it talks about tacks. That's, I think, very powerful imagery. And so that would be the I in Swift. So teaching your students Swift, for example, as a structure for analyzing poetry would be I think, a worthwhile way of quickly teaching them about it. Yeah, I'm more than happy to share this with you. It's just really powerful and useful right off the bat. And as I said, it's from SlidesGo. So for me, I use something like that. And let me share an example with you here of what we do spreadsheet wise. So with the spreadsheet, what we want to do is have students together look through a series of poems and try to identify those elements. After teaching the SWIFT elements, have students, look through the poems and try to identify those elements and ask them to, afterwards together in a group discussion, ask them about them. Okay, so in the chat now, here is my example of the spreadsheet. So students have previewed a series of poems. They've chosen a poem, or they've thought, you know what, I want to find my own. What we do is just put their names here. So, or actually, yeah. So the names are here to begin with, and beside the poem, student can just put a circle to indicate that that's the poem that they're going to do. Right. So student 1 wants to do Chen. They just put a circle there. Student 2 wants to do maybe, or student 6 wants to do Nai. Very easy in a sign up that's inside where most of the poems are. Again, students can retrieve their own poems, go out and look and discover their own poems. That's probably more advanced students that would do that. If they're going to do that, I ask them to share, and I ask them to do what I've done with these poems, is to find a link, or sorry, find a video and then insert the link at the top. So there's any number of ways that you can teach this with critical skills as well as ICT skills, right? The next step is to ask them to make a presentation about it. So this could take anywhere up to about a class where students are teaching each other about the various poets. So let's have a quick look at an example of a handout that I give. And it's not behaving very well right now. No, it's not behaving well at all. Okay, so we'll switch to this one. Pardon me. Yoo-hoo. Okay, so this is an example that I did in PowerPoint where it's fairly simple, an introduction and an outline of what they're going to talk about, introducing the poet, his or her work, when they wrote it, why it has relevance to now, what's unique about the poet or the poem. And then in slide 3, have them do the SWIFT analysis, choose 3 elements to focus on, for example, imagery, the theme, their word choice. In the 4th slide, why is it important today? Referring to current world environmental human rights issues. And then a parting shot to finish. So that's an example of how I would, a handout that I would give students, asking them to make their presentations. And then finally, once they're making their presentations, I would send to them a peer and self-evaluation form that asks them to critically listen to each other and evaluate each other on these 3 points: the design, the delivery, and their analysis of SWIFT. So students put in their name, of course, and then this is explained again. I explain it, and then I ask them to grade each other, 10 points for each of these categories, and then some short comments. So that's done for every single student. They do a self-evaluation and they do peer evaluations. And in the end, it comes to a spreadsheet. It looks like this. The student's input goes up top, for example. And simultaneously, I'm watching and grading. So my grades are in purple. The students' grades are in gold. between the two, they're averaged out. The students get an overall grade, a time for the presentation, my comments, some feedback on their grammar, because it's easy to record presentations now, right? So recording with student in it, me in it, and their presentation. And then I use basically just a fan to give them feedback when they make a mistake, and I'll note the feedback. For example, word choice mistake, one person didn't pronounce S twice, okay, and they would get this feedback along with comments from their peers down below. And it's super simple to just print it out as a PDF and send it to the students. Usually looks a lot better than that. Okay. Anyways, you get the idea, right? Oh, so we want to go portrait, that's why. Okay, and then they would get that. They would get all of that feedback. I think I'm just about done, 15 minutes now. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them now.